Welcome back to Bombastic Nation and Ting and Ting and Ting. Back with some more vibe for all you know what I mean? And to those of you who have commented, thank you for commenting. Keep the comments coming. Like the video, share the video. You know what I'm saying, Ting? Today we're going to go into part 4 of Otto Von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor, Extra Histories. Part 4, man. Yeah, I'm glad somebody suggested this to me. This was fun learning about Otto von Bismarck. Thanks for sending that to me. Let's go ahead and YouTube and simmer.
It is go time in Bismarck land. Bismarck had a list and he was checking it twice. Action item number 1 on that list: steamroll some Danes. 16 years prior, in 1848, Prussia had invaded Denmark with the hopes of annexing the largely German-speaking duchies of Schleswig and Holstein, but the threat of international intervention had sent them packing. Now it was time for revenge, or at least a very pragmatic seizure of territory. You see, the Danish king had just cacked it, and as basically always happens when a European king checks out, his death left everybody scrambling over the succession. And in this case, that scramble was played out between one...
I wonder why that is. You know, because I've noticed that when a great ruler dies, or, you know, a stable enough ruler dies back then, it's just total chaos as soon as he dies. Especially if it's like a king or something like that, or an emperor, and his family gets to be next in line. There's always a fight. They always have some illegitimate son or something silly like that. That's you know, questioning the legitimacy of the throne, or who is ruling the throne, because he's a son too, and then they start killing each other, and they never seem to live long. They live short reigns. It's weird.
One staunchly Danish branch of the family and one sympathetic to the Germans. When the Danish group won out, they decided that it was high time to rule Schleswig and Holstein directly, to finally incorporate them into the Kingdom of Denmark, not to leave them as semi-independent duchies with their own weird rules and privileges. This violated a treaty the Danes had signed with the Prussians, though, and gave Bismarck his chance. But it also made things tricky. After all, if Bismarck used ideas of liberating the oppressed and defending smaller nations' rights to justify invading Schleswig-Holstein, he'd have to find a really good reason for sticking around to occupy those places himself, instead of just leaving again. He had been setting up these dominoes for a while, though. There would be no repeat of the last time when they had to flee due to other powers coming in on the side of the Danes. He had already secured the friendship of the Russians, and made vague promises to the French that they might see some territory out of the whole deal if Prussia was allowed to absorb Schleswig and Holstein.
And
without Russia or France, Britain would protest, but they'd never actually go to war on the Danish side. He had also suckered in Austria, convincing them that they were all on the same side, Germans defending Germans and all that. He even convinced them to be allies and contribute a horde of troops to the effort. And this is key. Not only did he need Austrian troops to secure a quick victory, but it would also make them complicit. If, after they won, he said that Prussia was going to take territory, the Austrians wouldn't walk away without their share, which not only meant that European public opinion wouldn't turn against Prussia, but also meant that he wouldn't lose the moral high ground in the German Confederacy. And his plan worked perfectly.
Oh, finally, his plans are coming in working.
Rapidly overran Denmark. The Danes had to grant the independence of Schleswig and Holstein. Bismarck made some ludicrous demands, and the Austrians, not wanting to be left out, eventually caved to a compromise that left Bismarck exactly where he actually wanted to be. Prussia would keep Schleswig, the Austrians would get Holstein, and he would get a small pile of other minor concessions to boot. But Bismarck was always a man of large appetites. He didn't come all this way to only get Schleswig, and so part 2 of the plan commenced. Operation Make Fun of Austrian Incompetence. He played up everything that went wrong in Holstein,
man is a politician,
and talked openly about it being a breeding ground for revolutionaries. His sound and fury brought the two nations to the brink of war, but both of their monarchs wanted to avoid such a conflict between brothers. Wilhelm accepted the possibility of war, but forbade Bismarck from explicitly goading the Austrians anymore. But Bismarck's work on that front was already done. He had a backup plan in case war didn't come. Bismarck always had a backup plan. But he spent most of his time trying to shore up alliances, to make sure that Prussia was ready for the fight his king sort of didn't want. First, the Italians. Victor Emmanuel, the man trying to unify Italy, desperately wanted to take over Venice, which was in Austrian hands. I mean, how can you have an Italy with no Venice? But he was never going to have the strength to fight Austria alone, and so Bismarck seized on this, getting him to agree that if Prussia and Austria went to war, the newly formed Italian kingdom would join in for only the small price of one Venice, which Bismarck didn't really want anyway. Next, the French. While not publicly successful in securing the French as allies, Bismarck was dealing with Napoleon III here, a man too clever for his own good by half. Napoleon III, who saw himself as the equal of his famous uncle, but really wasn't, took the only course of action that would get him nothing.
See?
He wouldn't support...
See what I'm saying? There's Napoleon and then there's this guy here, incompetence, you know? That's what I'm saying.
Prussia, but he wouldn't support Austria either. This was just fine by Bismarck. Finally, Bismarck kept pressure on Austria, having Prussian officials meet with Romanians and Magyars, Czechs and Serbs, any ethnic minority within the Austrian Empire, all in order to make it look like he was building allies and raising legions of revolutionaries ready to revolt the moment the Austrians went to war. But Bismarck's plans were interrupted by one thing he did not factor in. As he walked down the great boulevard Unter den Linden, 2 shots broke the quiet. He whirls. A young man stands before him, revolver in hand. The 51-year-old Bismarck grabs him. 3 more shots ring out as they grapple. Finally, soldiers run up and subdue the young man. As the assassin is hauled off, they check Bismarck for wounds. One finds a hole in his coat, and follows it to find a hole in his waistcoat, which, with some trepidation, he follows to find a hole in Bismarck's shirt. All 5 shots had hit. But every one of them had either only grazed him or bounced off of his ribs. In a moment that history doesn't record, but I think we all know happened, Bismarck simply nodded to the soldier, said, "Iron Chancellor," put on shades, and walked away. Refusing to let one measly assassination attempt get in the way of a good war, Bismarck went right back to work getting the German-speaking world to tear itself apart. And as rumors swirled, the Austrians felt they had to make a move, so they called the Pan-German Diet in Frankfurt to decide the issue of Schleswig and Holstein. The Diet moved against Prussia, but this played right into Bismarck's hand. The moment the Diet came to their decision, the Prussian representative read a statement that Bismarck had prepared for just such a moment, declaring the Diet invalid and the German Confederation dissolved. Now it would be war. It would...
Man, he's playing everybody. That's a politician there, man. You know, thinking, planning, figuring how to go wrong so and come back wrong so. That's a trickster right there for you. Getting everybody to agree with him. You know, getting Austria and Italy and France to agree with him and the others. Must be a master negotiator.
Would be the northern German states and Prussia against the southern German states and the Austrian Empire. Hundreds of thousands of men were mustered. It could have been a long war, but now the king had in his service a general as capable on the battlefield as Bismarck was in the conference room, General Moltke. The uncle of the General Moltke who will so disastrously lead the German forces into the First World War, this Moltke could not have been more different from his nephew. He was one of the first to see that the modern rifle had made the idea of the frontal charge obsolete. He grasped the importance of railroads for mobilization and realized that modern armies were too big to be commanded by one man, that plans should be flexible and subordinates should be allowed to take initiative within them. It was this Moltke who famously said, "Plans never survive contact with the enemy." Moltke led a lightning war, crushing the once great Austrian Empire within weeks. And now, where Bismarck had once had to work so hard to get the king to go to war, their success had been so great that he had to work equally hard to get the king to stop. Bismarck realized that they could only push so far before the other great powers stepped in and all of the work that he had done would be undone. More still, he believed that once he had eclipsed them, he might need the Austrians to serve as a balance against one of the other great powers, so he must not impose on them a peace that would leave them hating Prussia. So
He's got it
Bismarck
all
called
planned
in
out.
his erstwhile enemy, the Crown Prince, the same Frederick Wilhelm who he had so unsuccessfully tried to put on the throne as a toddler, and put him to work reining in his father. Fritz, a lover of peace despite being an excellent military commander, convinced the king to accept the deal that Bismarck had on the table. Prussia would take over most of northern Germany. The German Confederation as a body would be disbanded. Their Italian allies would get Venice, and Austria would forever be banned from any pan-German parliament, or from meddling in German affairs. Oh, and weirdly, Liechtenstein became an independent country, so that also. All in all, things were looking up for Bismarck's grand project of uniting all of Germany under Prussian rule. There just loomed one more obstacle, one great nation that, although neutral so far, would oppose any further increase in German unity and strength. There was the problem of France.
Man, that dude is just slipping and sliding and thing, you know, and getting his way. Wow. I'm excited to see the next part of this. See, you know, how we succeed, because I've never heard of him before. Thank you guys for suggesting I watching this series here, man. You know, listen, I'm gonna put the link in the description for this video. I do that for every single video, so go down there, check out the channel that this video is on, see what else they have there that you could watch, and you know, check this one out where I don't stop and talk ever so often. All right, listen. I hope you guys are taking care of each other out there, okay? Cool runnings. Oh, I always keep forgetting I'm Mr. Giant.